something? Here we go. All right. Good evening, Facebook and whoever, all my favorite people and Facebook friends out there. I am Bummi Anderson, and of course, I've been doing these podcasts called Intersection for a couple of years now. And so I want to thank all of you who have tuned in to check out and listen to and watch, and those who go back later and watch videos of these broadcasts. I am grateful for you. I'm glad that you're joining us tonight. I have now. Let me. This is one of those people who, if you listened last week, that I talked about trusted voices, and I mentioned this great man who wears so many hats in my life. Let me say this: I met him when I was 25 years old, and if I told you how old I was now, you'd be like, "What?" But I met him when I was 25 years old. Let's just say I'm in my 50s. I'll give you that much. And so I've known him really practically over half of my life. I've known him. And we have walked together through every season that you can name in life. And so I've served with him as one of his elders. You name it. We've gone through death together. We've gone through happy times together. We've gone through victories and triumphs, some defeats. We've gone through a lot of things together. And so I am so happy. I'm always happy and honored that he takes the time out of his busy schedule to sit down with me. And so tonight is very it means a lot to me. And so I want to welcome the great man of God, Bishop Victor L. Powell, to Intersection Broadcast or Podcast tonight. Hello, Bishop Powell.
Well, hello, Boomy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
It is such an honor. I'm always excited and nervous at the same time whenever we get together and do something. We
Wow.
can even just we can sit and have coffee at Starbucks, and I'm nervous. So,
Oh my. Wow. Wow.
and because you're such a brilliant mind, and it's such an honor to be with you. So, and to the Facebook audience, thank you all so much. I see some familiar names out there, so thank you to all of these great people who are tuning in to talk about such a delicate subject. But now, if you overheard the Boomy and I conversation, we can talk about anything forever and ever and ever.
Yes. I hate to say Bishop at 7 o'clock. Cause I really want, and I'll ask you about that off, because I do want to hear what we were talking about, and I didn't want to bring it up because I don't know what family member would be on and they would hear it. Um,
I see.
so, but I do want to talk to you about that experience. Wow, I don't know, 28 years ago, 28, 29 years ago, and so I want to talk to you about that. There's so many questions. I sent you a list of questions, but I know that we probably won't even scratch the surface. so so
Yeah,
I already know
yeah,
that. But one of the things I did do, I will tell you, and it was like, usually I remember practically every sermon I ever heard you preach. And I
yeah. Because I can
um
rely on you being the memory. If
right,
I want to
right.
remember something, I can always yes.
Right. So, but last night, my memory, I could not remember the name of the message that you preached for Elder Charlene Wingfield's granddaughters. And I know what you said, but I could not remember the title. And so I reached out to her and I asked her. And first, she said, I don't remember. This morning, she sent me a text and she said that the name of the message, and I said, that's it, was called The Mystery of Faith. And
Wow.
the reason why that message came back to me to ask was because you talked about being able to ask God questions. You might not get the answer to the questions. That wasn't what the focus
Yes.
of your message was, but the having the ability or having being able to ask God questions. And so that's why that message just resonated with me last night because I wanted to talk to you about that. And before in the context of grief, because that was what it was. She was burying her granddaughters who had died in a house fire. And I looked it up to 2009. I was like, wow, it's been so long ago.
Whoa, it's been
But
that
proper
long.
to them
Yes.
just yesterday. Um, so that came back to my remembrance to talk about that. And so I said, wow, the mystery of faith, that fits right into the intersection of faith and grief and faith. And so for those of you that are joining, thank you so much for joining us. Um, Tomorrow, the March 28th, will mark the 5th year anniversary of my twin sister's passing and passing due to COVID. And so this is one of the things that are inspiring me to do this, to talk about grief. Because I think oftentimes we don't talk about it. We just assume
Right.
people go on with their lives and they pick up and they move on. And, that's simply not the case. So I wanted to have you on to talk about it from a faith perspective. Um, do you remember that message, Mystery of Faith? Do you
I
remember?
I remember it as clearly as I see your name on the screen tonight, because it was. I can remember the night before um, that eulogy, that service, that homegoing, if you will. Three first time and last time since then. That experience. Three young girls at the same time died in a fire. And I imagined what the father was going through. I imagined what the mother was going through. I imagined what the grandmother was going through. And and I'm sitting in my den and I'm asking God, why, what? And all of a sudden I saw some figure who asked God a question. And all of a
Mm,
sudden I started dealing with all these myths about, because we were taught, Boomy, as you well know, we were taught you don't question
you
God. You
don't
don't
question
question God.
God.
And and so it was through that experience that I started researching and studying and finding out that God is not intimidated by our questions, and
Yes.
that was never really biblical. Um, and a sovereign God who's got the universe in the palm of his hand is no way. And it's almost like we don't fully understand that if I'm hurting that deeply, to not question it is almost to say God doesn't identify with my pain.
Yes.
So it was from that moment and that experience that I understood that God, the Father, the God of the heavens, whatever you believe about that, that he's huge enough, if you will. I'm going to use that natural term. He's huge enough. He's big enough he's God enough to handle our broken seasons and our hurting seasons where we question, now, why God? Why God? And so what I felt to do was to give the family the permission
Yes.
to ask God a question in the midst of that pain.
Do you think in some way when you, because I remember it clearly as well, and I think for the first time in my life, I said, yeah, that's because I had been taught, you don't question God. I had heard that all my life. And what kind of, how do you think that that based upon the way we've been conditioned, or what I call socialized, socialization is that which we've been taught that is acceptable and not acceptable in the culture. How much of being socialized do you think has taught us how to deal with grief?
Um, Particularly African Americans, we to some degree we've been brainwashed by religion, and if you want to influence any culture or any ethnic group or any people, music and religion, music and
Yes.
religion, music and religion, and so we've been taught that um, that we ought to be tough, and our
Yes.
experiences have conditioned us. Rather, it was taught, and some of it was very real, because a woman as a slave had to have a
Mm.
baby, and a week later she was back in the field.
Mm.
You know, so we were conditioned, and that shaped how we felt and believed that our God saw us. And so we were taught not to cry before people. We were taught subliminally, and so that conditioned us to not only how we saw God, Boomy, but how we saw one another. If you're not careful, if you're around the right around the wrong people, they'll tell you toughen it up. Don't you
Mm.
let nobody see you cry. And so all those subliminal messages really shaped how we view death, how we view God, how we view one another, how we view weakness and strength, being vulnerable, being transparent. And so here we are, and COVID shook some of our
Mm.
beliefs.
Wow.
It challenged a lot of our beliefs. It helped us to really come face to face with some of the things that we've been teaching folk.
Mm. Like what,
Yeah.
Bishop? Can you give us
Um,
an example? What for you as a pastor? What is something that COVID kind of, in terms of teaching people? What is something that can
that
you?
that if you love God, if you trust God, some things will never come nigh your dwelling. Some
Mm.
scripture that's been taken out of context, and
Mm.
if you know if you it's like Job's friends. They basically accuse him, where's the sin in your life, because you're suffering and you must have done something wrong. God is a booger man. This is why this is happening. You're
Mm.
suffering because you did something wrong. um, just like the prosperity message has challenged a lot of our theological perspectives, and suffering has done the same. We're coming face to face with how we view God and how we view money, how we view suffering, how we view when pain come to us personally. Does that mean we have done something wrong? Does that
Yep.
mean God is judging us? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I remember I remember thinking and having a conversation with you, I think early on, like, okay, what did okay, I and I'm being very vulnerable. Said, okay, God's getting back at me for something. That's how I felt,
Wow. Yeah.
you know.
And for the sake of our audience, we I was just talking to Archbishop Kirby a couple of days ago, and we normally when we get on the phone, we're going to stay on the phone an hour, but your beliefs about God shapes your belief about yourself.
Mm.
If you view God as a punishment-driven God and not a
Mm.
redemptive father, if you don't view him as a loving father, not that there are no consequences to our behavior, but if you view him as one not healthy fear of the Lord, like
Mhm.
reverence for the. But if you're scared of God, if that's the premise of how you view him as a right and wrong God, not a God of grace, not a God of love, not a God of mercy, not a God who introduces you to his love first and then introduces you to his truth first. If you view God as a punishment driven God, then anything negative that happens in your life, around you, to you, who you gonna blame? You're gonna blame
Right.
either God, either God or yourself.
Wow.
And so our view of God, our biblical view, really, really shapes our self love and how we see other people also.
Wow. Wow. One of the things I am curious about, well, a couple of things. Number one, as a pastor, when someone informs you that their loved one has passed away, what is typically your general your first response to that person?
Well, one thing I can say that is not number one is I never open up with I understand,
Mm,
because grief is a personal journey. It's an inward journey. It's a journey that no one's grief is a twin.
wow.
It's not an identical twin. There's no, pain is. I can't project how I have viewed the losses in my life upon someone else. So this answer may really surprise you. Sometimes I don't say anything.
Wow.
I called to check on you. I I I wanted to express my deep condolences. I don't, because it's not, there's no script for this.
Yes.
You know, if you do a death call as a chaplain, as a pastor, the loss of, there's things that you say, but I'm talking about on a personal level when, someone that you've shepherded, you pastored, or a friend. Bishop Kirby taught me this, Reverend Merritt taught me this, the late, great Milton Merritt. Presence is a ministry.
Mm,
Presence is a ministry. And so often they hear our words before they feel our presence. And sometimes we miss people, Boomy, because we don't know how to just simply be present.
wow. And sometimes
And then
silence is speaking.
it's speaking. I'll never forget this. Never forget this. A dear brother, friend of mine's, one of his family members may be on. He's been gone, deceased now for, oh God, well over 30 years. And he was he it took him a month or two to transition. So I got an opportunity to visit him after work and go up and see him. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. He said to me, Boom, he said, "You're my best visitor."
Wow.
And I said, "Why?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you don't talk unless I'm talking.
Oh, wow.
If I He said some of the visitors can see I'm coughing, choking, and they'll still be trying to have a conversation with me." He said sometimes you just sit in that chair and look at me and laugh at me or smile at me. And if I say something, you respond. And I never forgot that. Every part of the challenge with grief is that we have a script and we take that same script to every situation,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is just one on one wrong.
Wow.
you know, that every person is different. Every person is unique. Every situation is unique, and every loss is not the same.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about when you became a chaplain, when you were going through the clinicals, I think it was. Um, this was before the pandemic. You were talking about this one Sunday, and you mentioned that it had given you you had pastored people for years, and you walk with people, but when you that clinical experience, that being a chaplain changed your perspective on how to walk with someone who's dying. Tell me how that impacted you to what changed in terms of your perspective on death and dying and grieving.
Two or three major things, but Boomy, I chaplaincy, especially from a clinical perspective and more of a holistic perspective, because evangelicals, we have this great need to change everyone.
Mm,
Chaplaincy taught me that that's not my responsibility
wow.
and that it's almost manipulation to attempt to convert someone and they're facing death.
Wow.
That if you're not careful, you have this end in mind. And chaplaincy really taught me your only motive is presence. Your only motive is what is the person's need, not my need.
Mm,
And it's made me a little bit more broader in knowing how to be present with people. And it may be age also, Boomy, that it caught me at such a good time in my life as I'm transitioning into being an elder statesman, if you will, an elder leader, elder pastor, elder brother. I don't have any grandchildren. I'm really wondering what's going on with that. But anyway, that's a side conversation.
they're coming, Bishop.
But
Yes.
the demand or the need to shape people into my own image.
Wow.
And when people are grieving, it is it's almost offensive for that to be my end, my motive.
Wow. Wow.
So that's how chaplaincy shaped. Let them lead the conversation. Let them tell you what they need. Let them, I'm not the shaper. I'm not God. It really freed me to be more of a listener.
Wow. Wow. I I'm trying to see how I can say this.
Say it.
I um well, let me just say this. Some people might already know this already because I think I touched on it on the last broadcast, and then people personally, you know this. I was very angry with God, and anger is an emotion. Okay, and I'm not saying that I'm not angry now. I don't think I'm as angry as I was. But and I'm not saying I am angry. I don't know what I am. Okay. But I was very angry. And there were some people who said you shouldn't be angry with God, trust God, don't be angry with him. And I got a lot of that. Um and but I kept feeling, okay, well, he's my father, so he can handle that. He can handle that. What I think is, what may be anger to me might not even be anger to God. I don't
Right.
know. You know. But how has any loss that you've experienced caused you to be angry?
Oh, Lord. Absolutely. Well, Bobby, as you were talking, because we've had this kind of conversations off and on for a number of years now, but um, this whole myth about uh, God, God gonna get you if you're angry with Him. God is big enough to handle your anger. He's big enough to handle our cry. He's big enough to handle that. Let me help you, and let me help the audience. How is it that if anger is my truth, he can't handle truth?
Mm,
if anger is my truth, how am I having a relationship with the Father if anger is my truth and I can't tell him my truth?
Mm.
And we call him the truth.
Yes.
So and it's relationship. Religion shape all kinds of myths, and it's almost like this myth that we used to hear as a young children growing up in church. Somebody would die, and you hear all this kind of stuff that says,
Yes.
you need a God got another flower in his garden.
Yes.
You know,
God
that's
needed another flower.
needed another
Yeah.
flower. God
Yeah.
don't need me. I'm not no. If I'm not a flower here, I'm sure not gonna be a flower up here. I'm not no flower. I'm flawed. I'm not no flower. So, so
Yes.
God, I ain't got to die to So that's all that drama. So anger is a place of truth, and that's where we start.
Yes.
Place of truth, and I believe that He's vast enough. He's great enough that if I express my truth to him, that's a place of understanding, and there's a
Yes.
place between you and the individual, you and God and you and God, who's out there. Anger, because anger with God. Now you remember now, because God is such a bad God.
Yes.
God is he's such a killer and a murderer, and anything bad that
Yes.
happens in life. So we immediately, blame God. But the great Reverend Merritt said that there's three or four entities. There's God, there's life, there is the devil, there is other people. And so it's funny that
Mm.
everything bad is he gets the hit. Um, so anger is a good place to start with God, because now I'm saying I'm being truthful about my pain. I'm being truthful
Yes.
about how I feel, and it gives our relationship a broader space to grow and to heal and to come through that. But if I lie to him about how I really feel, and that's kind of a paradox because he knows how I really feel. So my honesty is not for God.
Mm.
Honesty is for me.
Yes.
And so that whole myth about I can't be angry, I can't ask God a question, I don't see that, and I don't see that in relationship to him being my father, and I don't see that biblically. I'll just use those two streams.
Was grief ever a time?
Is Faith is mixed with doubt.
Yes.
Faith is mixed with fear. Faith is mixed with this ain't working. I'm mad and frustration.
Right.
I don't think you can take any of that out of faith. But you were about to ask a question. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's good, Bishop. I was going to I don't remember what I was going to ask you. I don't remember, but um which leads me to this. Okay. There's a scripture that says that we don't grieve believers. Don't grieve like the world grieves. I have been wondering, what does that mean? What does grief what does grief, because people quote it, but they don't give any explanation. They don't expound on it. They oh, you don't grieve like the world grieves. And that's it. And I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? How is there a particular, how does the world grieve, in that what makes me I can't grieve that way? You know,
Let me tell you the context, and how that's taken to some degree out of context. What is actually saying is that when you say the world,
Mhm.
we don't grieve like the world. It is suggested that the unbeliever doesn't have an anchor,
Mm,
that the unbeliever is missing one link, one
mm.
thing, a hope, an anchor. S- That's the thing that we don't have in common. But our grief is common. Our grief, our pain, our losses are the same. People of faith
Wow.
lose money. The people of faith lose their mothers. The people of faith lose their fathers.
Yes.
The people of faith lose people tragically. The people of faith and unbelievers lose people. You wake up one day, you kiss your husband and your wife, and that's the last time you see them. You are
Mm.
devastated. And the anchor that I have sees me through those processes of anger. You know the steps to anger, denial, then
Yes.
anger, and then you start to
Steps to
come
grief.
around, and then
Yes.
grief, and then what happens? You loop around that cycle for a long time. But the difference between quote unquote the world and the believer, I have an anchor that sustains me through that whole process,
Mm.
where a unbeliever may not have that rock, that
Mhm.
lily in the valley, that
Yes.
bright and morning star, if you
Yes.
will. Um,
Yes.
I'm using those that literature for those who. So I don't think it means that the believer don't cry,
Right.
that the believer don't get angry with the Father, that the believer don't ask questions, that the believer don't sometimes want to hit a wall and say, "Why did you take my sister, my brother, my mother, my father?"
Yes.
That's ludicrous. And I'll say this, that's why so many believers need therapy right now,
Mm.
because we don't give space to need mental care and get mental
Wow.
care. Uh, the Holy Spirit does not exempt you from needing mind healing and wellness and
Yes.
emotional healing and wellness. So, all these beliefs
Mhm.
that we don't grieve like other people, the only connection, the only rock we have is Him, His presence, our faith in Him. And He sees us through deep wounds and pains, Boomy.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but if you believe that you're not supposed to cry, you see all that subtle belief that you're supposed to be strong, man up.
Right.
Right now, I'm not manning up. My brother, my dad, and Femi. Those three deaths has shaped so much about how I understand him and the Father and my relationship with God. Um, so grief needs space, and
Mhm.
religion often take that space away from us.
Wow. Wow. Because when you talked about the anchor and then religion taking that, I I talk about the time that I didn't want to pray, and I didn't. I couldn't pray. Not that I necessarily always didn't want to, but I couldn't for whatever reason. Okay, because I was whatever I was, but the anchor was still present. It just wasn't. He just was not present in a way that people think that he should be because of how you are. You see what I'm saying? Because of the way that you are dealing with it. That does not mean that he's not present, that the anchor is not present. It just means that this is how I'm dealing with it. And I think sometimes people get lost with that. Because I'm not doing certain things, or because I am doing certain things, the person is lost, or the person is, I don't know, whatever the person is. But the anchor is still present. He is still present. Even in my silence, my anger, my confusion, my depression, whatever it is, he's present.
He's present. And the psalmist, for believers that are out there, the psalmist and the unbeliever, the psalmist said, "If I make my bed in hell,"
He's
this is
there.
a great psalmist. He's there.
Yes.
Um, we have to stop creating a God that's so small.
Mm,
One writer, author, talked about the otherness of Christ.
mm,
We we try to make God like us, meaning if Boomy gets angry with me, I don't talk to her.
mm.
If you make me mad, I distance and alienate myself from you.
Wow.
But I believe now for Bible believing people and for unbelievers, I see where God kept talking to Cain, though he was wrong.
Yes.
And Cain was angry, and God's still talking to us. God's still
Yes.
talking to us. So I use this reference is that God ain't afraid of anger. He's not afraid of a question. He's not afraid of my doubt. He's not afraid of my fears. He's not afraid of my deep pain. Matter of fact, if we want to really get technical, he's drawn to my pain and my
Wow.
brokenness and my hurt. He near to the brokenhearted.
Yes.
I, did I make that up? He's near to the
No.
brokenhearted. Because what happens, we run people away from the house of God because we try to make them in our own image.
Mm,
That's not our responsibility. And we create this God that's got all these parameters. He's not afraid of our pain. He's not afraid of our distance. You mentioned, I thought you were going to ask me a question about it, but you mentioned about during your deep, painful moments, you couldn't pray.
yes.
In Jesus's deep, painful moment, all he did was he cried,
Yes.
Abba, Father, why have you forsaken me? If you walk with God, I'll say two or three things. If you walk with God long enough and live in the world long enough, there is going to come a season we all feel like, God, you left me.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
we don't look at the scripture. We are religious, and we will overlook all of these real experiences that real people had with God. Nolan says silence is prayer. I've had
Wow.
more intimate moments with God. And actually, Bome, sometimes these very deep grieving experiences is the Father introducing you to another side of Him,
Wow.
a side of Him that don't need your words for you to commune with Him, a
Wow.
side of Him that's near. Because I will tell you, I pray different now that my pain is deeper.
Mm.
I don't talk as much to the devil anymore.
Wow.
I hardly ever have a conversation with the devil now.
Wow.
And I spend more time being quiet. And so I and I know a lot of believers are going to see and process a lot of things that we're talking about differently and may even be offended, but God is not religious.
Mm.
And he's big enough to handle pain.
Wow.
He's big enough to handle my tears. And so that's real relationship. Bomi, I don't want to be in a relationship with anyone, humanly or divine, that if I have a bad day, all of a sudden they not my friend anymore.
Mm.
So I don't know. I just see them differently now.
Wow. Wow. You I'll end with the question I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask about, um, you mentioned that your dad and your Femi's death, your dad's death, that was the 3rd death you mentioned, but I'll come back to
My
that.
brother,
Your brother, um,
who died by
who
suicide.
died by
Yes.
suicide, yes. How did I what are some how did grief how did you deal with those deaths? What was your process? What was some of your grieving process as it relates to I know there were different people, but, you know, what are some of the things that you how did you and you don't, you don't get over it, but how have you been able to navigate?
It's and I'm so glad is that you say you don't get over it because it's a journey. It's a day by day thing, and we've talked about this over the years many times. But we grief is so close to us that it doesn't matter how long ago the person transitioned or how short that it can come up on you like it happened just yesterday. So that's one thing you have to just kind of come to grips with. But two, uh, Boomy, Nolan, uh, all of these great folk that are on, Valencia, it was through those three major deaths and transitions and one major catastrophe that happened in my life that I learned how to introduce grace to myself.
Mm,
I started giving grace to myself. So that means I gave myself space to cry. I gave myself space. I give myself space to be transparent and vulnerable. Every day, I, I, I'm not required to have it all together. And graciously, and I'm so grateful that the Lord has given me two or three people in my life that I can be vulnerable about. This is what I'm feeling and sensing
mm,
right now, and there was no judgment in return to have it together. And so that support system, that conversation, and know you ought to get over it because anyone with an ounce of 2 cent of sense, conversation is helping me get through it,
yes.
and you never get over it. So you're getting through it. You're processing it, and I've learned to be quiet and have conversations with the Father, and that's how I process that anger. That's how I process that grief. That's how I process the feeling of, and I'm not talking about self pity.
Mm,
I'm talking about the depths of the loss.
yes.
Um, and people who won't let you have self pity, but they'll let you be self aware.
Wow.
They'll let you. Today, I'm not myself. As an example, today I'm not myself, and today I'm not feeling. I'm thinking about my brother, and can I share, bro? Talk to me about that. How, what's going on? Self
Yes.
aware. They let me be self aware, in touch with myself, mindful of where I'm at, and they're able to hear and listen. And that's how I process. Because it's not like how did I do it; it's how I do it. Because it's as you well know, the latest deep loss is Femi.
Yes.
That's not that's you don't pastor somebody 25 years almost and not feel that loss.
Yes.
And so some days, as you well know, and you can speak to this, you You can be laughing, talking.
Mm-hmm.
I like for my brother's death, I struggled with guilt for enjoying life. And I'll stop there.
Yeah.
I felt
And
guilt. I felt guilt. Like
mm,
my brother's gone. He should be here, and I'm feeling. Here I am laughing, or here I am. I shouldn't be
yes.
feeling this good about life. You know. So
Yes.
yeah.
And I've certainly felt that. I've early on, a couple years after, I would be laughing or something, and I would stop because I would feel this instant guilt. You're having fun, but then I learned that laughing is a form of grief. It's a form of real grieving, because when you start thinking about the and it makes the things that that something that happened, you remember, that's funny, and telling somebody about it, or you thinking about it, you just start laughing. I learned, okay, this is I'm grieving. This is a Laughing is a form of grieving. And so that has helped me to understand that and not feel guilty for that.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
wanted to ask you, because I know, we used to have this conversation. Boomer, what are you doing? You usually ask me, what are you doing? When you gonna do? Are you working on something? Um, which leads me to this question: How? What are some good things, for lack of a better word? What are some things that you hope that can come out of a loss, that you want for people who've lost someone? What are some things that, because we know that all things work together. What are some things that perhaps, because there are things that I would not have never ever done, like this podcast. I don't know if I would ever be doing this podcast. But what are some things that you hope that people can take from their loss, and be motivated or inspired, or what are some things?
It's I'm writing this book. It's called, and I think I mentioned it to you, Making Memories.
Yes.
I lost so many people during COVID that I remember, and this is how the thought came. I'm thinking that it was divine. I started remembering Gussie Whitlow. The last time I
Hmm.
saw Gussie, I remember the last time I saw David Starling. I remember the last time I saw this person, that person, all my encounters. And so one of the things that has resonated with me deeply is this: you're going to have a last moment with every human being you know.
Yes.
So, what I would hope, and what has become a learning curve for me, I sat with my two dearest pastoral friends a couple of days ago, and we started at 4, we ended at 8. Me, Pastor Hurd, and Bishop Sneed do that more now than we did before COVID.
Wow.
What do we and now mind you, you'd have to know Brother Hurd, and you'd have to know Jimmy, Bishop Sneed. Jimmy, over the years, love you, boy. Love you, boy. Get off this phone, boy. I love you, man. You know I love you. Pastor Hurd is a little different, right? Now we all tell each other, love you, man.
Wow.
So the learning curve, Pearl, Yannette, Clara, Sister Gonzalez, Brother Nolan, and Sister Shawan, is all the arguing and the fussing, minimize it.
Mm,
Making memories, writing books, traveling and going places with the people you love,
mm,
uh, because there is going to be a moment. And I remember the last time and I think about Gussie Whitlow more because her and her husband died within
mm.
just
Days or
hours of
weeks,
one
right?
another.
Yeah.
And but I remember all these years I've known Gussie, we've always had positive encounters, but this encounter was so different. And it just
Wow.
made me love her so much more. She had this powerful comment that she made about me. And so that's one of the things that I'm putting in the book, making memories. Remember now, one moment in all of our lives, Boom, as much as we love each other, as much as we've known each other over half your life
Yes.
and 20 some years of my life, 100 years from now, 40 years from now, there's going to be a moment that's going to be the last time we see each other. And if you outlive me, I'll outlive you. I want to be able to dance over our memories.
Mm.
So that's my learning curve for for grief and for uh, living and dying. Live so you can die with great dignity and peace and glory. Yeah.
Wow. For children who grieve, who lost a parent, my parents. For me, my experience with death has been an interesting experience. I can remember going, my grandmother, my mother's mother, taking me into funeral homes to see people, and I'd be kicking and screaming. And I can remember funerals when I was little. When they were getting ready to open that casket, I was gonna get up. I'm gonna run out of the church. So that had so I've had this fear of death, how it came about. I remember those experiences. But for children who their experience with death may come young, while they're young, losing a parent, losing a sibling, how what are some ways that we can teach young people how to navigate grief when they're young?
I think it's important that language is everything. Take the spookiness. You remember I talked about what you believe about God,
Yes.
what your beliefs about God. Taking the spookiness out of death. Death um, is not the end. Death is transitioning into something new. Really teaching death properly. That it's not the end. It really is a form of a new beginning. Two, having I'll never forget this. This is going to help a lot of people that's listening. Um, that there was a lady who taught on death and dying, and she we were at this conference, and she says, and it was about end of life care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She started teaching her children about living and dying because she started giving them, purchasing them animals like a dog or a cat.
Yes.
Therapeutically, they would build that relationship, that bond with that animal, etc. And most likely would outlive that animal. And it gave them a sense of living and transitioning through that
Wow.
relationship. Now, in the therapeutic world, not only just counseling, not only talking, a supportive family, watching your language, but introducing them to the reality of living well with quality, explaining to them what happens, and utilizing some of the examples that we might have, having a relationship with an animal, getting close to that animal, but that animal has to leave here because you're likely going to outlive. So it gives the child an understanding of living and dying. I saw one of our dear sisters, Shawan, mention about counseling. Uh, I think it's very healthy to not only just put your children through counseling, but to go through counseling yourself if there's
Mm.
that need. Because your child may want to say something to a stranger that they don't necessarily say to you, or a therapist, or a pastor who can handle, who has that level of training. So I think all those things that I just mentioned, a combination of those things, um, can help a child process through grief and pain, um, and those kinds of things.
Wow. Well, everybody, the reason why I'm having this conversation is because on tomorrow, March 28th, will be the 5th year anniversary of the passing of my twin sister, Femi. And so every year I try to do something to mark it. And so I thought that this would be a good way to start a series of podcasts on grief. Um, I tell you, and so it has helped me. Bishop, you put me on to Anderson Cooper's podcast on grief. Stephen Colbert, I think the episode that you told me about, and I listened to it, and I've listened
Yes.
to several episodes because of that, because of you saying, "Hey, listen to this episode. I think this will help you." And so those kinds of resources are out there.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I've done. I saw that Nolan mentioned about pastors and grief.
Yes.
One of the things that I did, several different things. I've listened to the podcast, getting information, having conversations about losses. That's how I've managed through my personal grief. When I went to my counselor, oh, this is so interesting. When I went to my therapist, I went to her for one reason,
Mm.
um, and found out that I was grieving also. you know,
Wow.
uh, because we don't have this conversation and we don't talk about it. First of all, counseling means something's wrong with you. No, counseling means that you're in the right direction. That's not a sign of weakness; it's a sign of strength. And my therapist really helped me understand that I was grieving, and uh,
Wow.
and it's a beautiful journey if you embrace it, because it makes you deeply sensitive to other people's pain.
Wow.
It really
And that is so
does.
needed in this culture. We talked about that early before we came on about the that you were
Excuse me.
concerned that people are not as sympathetic, empathetic as they should be, and you think that was perhaps because of COVID. People have become, I don't want to use the word jaded. I don't think people are necessarily jaded when it comes to grief, but you mentioned that, um, that that people need to feel more than what we're feeling.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
see each other. Don't just wave. Don't just but see each other. Take a moment and say, "Hey, how you doing? How you feeling?" What's Because we're being shaped by the culture. We're being shaped by the culture for to be hard, to be,
Yes.
you know, but I think that there's something so little, just in little ways, is starting to happen. Like even tonight,
Yes.
boldly having a conversation that it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
It's just not okay not to get any help.
Wow.
It's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to be. It's okay to have a moment in your life where right now I'm not okay. I don't feel like talking. Because if I keep it real, maybe I could speak for pastors and leaders of from every walk of life, no matter what you are. I've not felt like preaching. I've not felt like praying. I've not felt like having it all together because I haven't had it
Yes.
all together. But I haven't felt like even looking like I had it all together.
Yes.
And you have to, give people space to come through their pain, no matter, because we're talking about grief in light of death. But what
Mm.
about grief in light of loss? No matter
Yes.
what that loss is,
Yes.
you know, um, oh God, you know. But wasn't that your decision? Yes, it was my decision, but I'm still grieving it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
uh, yeah. So it's okay. It's okay. We need to give each other the space to not be okay and to have
Wow.
that woosah moment,
Yes.
as my bad boys say.
Yes.
And breathe and self care, mental care, get it together, and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for Bishop for joining me. You know, there's so much I could say about you, your influence on my life. There are many times when I'm talking to people, even to my students, or I'm just talking to people about different things, that something you said always comes to my remembrance, and
Wow.
I share it because um life lessons I've gotten so much of my life lessons have come
Wow.
from you. And so,
Wow.
and I can tell you, I
What an
probably
honor.
wouldn't be where I am mentally, had it not been for your investment of your time and support, for me over the
Oh,
years.
Boomy.
And so,
I bless you. Bless you. Thank you
thank you
so
so
much.
much.
It's such an
And
honor.
th-
Everybody
thank
know
you.
how much I love Boomy. So, they don't come for Boomy. Not at least with me. 'Cause,
Yes.
hey, that,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
love Boomy.
And I want to
Yes.
thank everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I see a lot of people have comments and people because it resonated with them. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us tonight. God bless you.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me, Boomy.
You're welcome. Thank you.